President Bola Tinubu has presented the 2025 Appropriation Bill to the Joint House of the National Assembly. The 47.9 trillion naira ambitious appropriation for the year 2025 is to secure Nigeria's future, with security taking center stage and huge allocation to the military and police. In addition, infrastructure, health and education also top budget priorities. The budget also targets 3.89% in deficit and seeks to reduce inflation from 34% to 15%. Economic recovery in sight, increased foreign reserves, and trade surplus are two top priorities for the budget, as well as bold moves to achieve full security and productivity.
The 2025 budget that I present to you today is one of the restoration. It seeks to consolidate the key policies we have instituted to restructure our economy, boost human capital development, increase the volume of trade and investment, bolster oil and gas production, get our manufacturing sector humming again, and ultimately increase the competitiveness of our great nation and economy.
All right, then I have a development economist, Mr. Meka Okengu. He joins me from our Abuja studios to look at this document. Thank you so much, Mr. Okengu. It's good to have you on this show.
Thank you very much, Oli. It's good to be here too.
Yes, I think we start with your general overview of this budget. Looks very ambitious. But Mr. President is saying that is the way to go. 47.9 trillion naira.
Well, for me, I don't think it's ambitious vis-a-vis the size. I think it's ambitious vis-a-vis the intent. What I see as a very bold step there is the reduction of deficits to about 3.8 million, which is translating to about 13 trillion, which is what we will just be borrowing. That's very ambitious. But if you also juxtapose against that with the president's pronouncement that the revenue generation, in spite of the very turbulent times we are, rose to about 75%, which is translated to 14 trillion, of their targets. Then it also shows that, like he says, the country's economy is robust enough if well managed. Well, for me, yes, security got a large chunk of it, but I thought that instead of just dealing with security at the level of, kinetic, I thought it would have been a mixture of kinetic and non-kinetic, meaning that under that security architecture would have probably also brought in agriculture, which is a very major component of national security. I also thought that it would have brought in some level of skills, skills development, special skills development program, special food security production programs under the national security architecture, probably expanded it from the 4 trillion to something close to about 10 trillion. That would have been my take on it. But again, let's not be in a hurry to also now conclude on it, because what it is a budget proposal for now. It's only going to become a bill, when the National Assembly does the needful. If we are lucky from what we've seen last year and they're not going to be doing any more changes to it, then we can begin to now discuss it in greater detail.
I am also interested in the economic recovery. Sorry about that. Economic recovery is in sight, according to government. They are saying that we see foreign reserves now stand at about $40 billion US. We also see that trade surplus is at 5.8 trillion naira. How does all of this come to you? What do you take this as a plus?
Yeah, of course it has to be a plus. It is a plus. Okay, but again, each time we have a conversation, I say to you, it's not about the formal economy, really. The only time people can begin to really feel included is when you also now look at those people at the informal and the underground sectors of the economy. That is when people will now begin to now see the impact of us having $40 billion in a reserve and then having the trade surpluses that the president has announced. At the level of the formal economy, of course, we're doing well. We're going to keep expanding. But there has to be some social networking, some social expansion that can also now bring in the unbanked people, the underground economy, as it were, the informal people, the real sector, to actually also begin to feel the impact, of what the formal economy is gaining. So it's all good. I mean, it makes us more credit-worthy. It makes us a better investment destination, especially, it's obvious that crime and criminality, banditry and kidnapping is on the decline. And I join the president in praying for our gallant soldiers who are every day putting their lives at risk to make certain that the rest of us can sleep peacefully. But if we can eradicate, if we can, contain, if we can rein in banditry, if we can be able to now recover those ungoverned spaces, where non-state actors are holding sway now all across the country, then I can assure you that every prediction, every pronouncement of the president, including even, bringing down inflation to about 15%, because that will require a lot of productivity. That is going to be based on what it is that we're taking out of the country. So the moment we're able to grow, our foreign reserve based on what it is that we're taking to the table or bringing to the table or taking to the market, and then start increasing our market share, definitely, I even expect that we should go back to the single digit in our inflationary figures and rates.
Revenue, expected revenue, 34.8 trillion. Now I'm going to ask this. It looks like a tall order. But let's look at all of the reforms of government. The president says there is no going back. He said that again today at the assembly. Can we do a review of how it's been impacted and how you think we can, continue to hang on?
Remember, I was one of the very few people that said to you, I support the president's removal of his fuel subsidy. If you recall very early in the day, and a lot of people didn't find it funny. And I said it's time, that we move from our comfort zones of entitlement, and people begin to now think more positively and more inclusively. Today, if you go to fuel stations, you find out that the CNG lines is like in Abuja, where you have some of the stations operating, are a lot longer now, than the fuel lines. Okay, a lot of people are converting their vehicles, and everybody is seeing the gain of the CNG program. If you look at the other policies of the president, another topical one will be the tax reform bill. I also think that is one of the greatest things that he can do, because against what a lot of people think, they're just looking at it from two very broad or two very insignificant or two very minute aspects. If you go to read that bill thoroughly and truly, you would actually commend the president and see that that bill is more pro-poor than anything that we've ever had. Because for the first time in the history of our country, people who are earning under 800,000, wouldn't be paying tax, as against those who are earning 300,000, which is about 25,000 a month, paying about 7% in tax. So when people don't read and read thoroughly, it's also going to be, blocking a lot of leakages. By the time you now have the national tax system, being one singular window, then these multiple taxes would end. This is also one very major source of revenue leakages. And when you ramp in, I'm not trying to now tie it to the 34 trillion, that you think is ambitious. For a country of 200 million people, 34 trillion is really nothing vis-a-vis, revenue. But what I think the problem is, capacity and ability, to be able to expand our productivity base. And that is where I say to you, for me, the most critical national security is just not only productivity vis-a-vis, goods and services, but, national food security. That's very key. I thought that after the kinetic, the military and the police, and the other paramilitary services that the president had allocated 4 trillion, I thought that the next would have been, food security, and in that state, agriculture. And in that state, our industrial drive, where you're now having cottage industries, where we're able to now make certain that we now have value systems. The moment you have, companies that are valuing their products and they're paying VAT, they're paying company income tax, the staff are earning money and then they're paying their taxes, you might, even surpass the 33 trillion very easily.
That looks also pretty good. You've talked about allocation to the military, which everyone has commended. Investment in human capital development, such as education, healthcare, social services. Many will say at this time where the reforms are still on, there needs to be a clear court policy on social intervention.
I agree. And education also has to be properly defined. You know, are we talking about skills? Are we talking about technical? Are we talking about life? Are we talking about formal? Okay, and if you're talking about technical skills, then there has to be a special program for that technical skills, because we have a lot of, you know, people that have been lost to the attrition of education, especially in the war-torn, ravaged areas, okay, of the northeast, northwest, and a lot places in the Middle East, and even in the southeast where I come from, unfortunately, where, you know, we've lost all our Mondays. I mean, these guys who wake up in the morning and you have an exam and they say nobody should come out. So it's actually national, as it were, but it won't be that formal setting, you know, in my own thinking. I think there has to be some, you know, special and deep thinking that will go into what you just mentioned as education, so that we know what it is that we're educating. You know, we know what it is we're impacting. And then there should be job creation partnerships and labor market agreements that make sense that anybody who now goes through that skills training, that formal or informal education, or that technical empowerment has a job or has an engagement to do. And this is where I probably will bring in the new regional commissions that have been established. That ministry has a lot of job to do vis-a-vis human capital development. They will be, for me, the people that lead, you know, this special education that I just referred to.
Some will say that many times for Nigeria, it's not always about document or policy, it's about implementation. How would you assess, let's look at 2024's implementation and what you expect as we move on?
Well, implementation is driven by one very primary factor. One thing is for you to have a budget, which is a plan that you have cast in figures. Another thing is for that budget to become a bill. Another thing is for you to have money to be able to operate it. Okay, so it's not enough for us to celebrate 49 trillion or 47 trillion or even 100 trillion. It has to be, that money has to be available. And you find out that the president is very clear, you know, on where he wants to get the money from. He wants to expand the revenue, you know, base. He wants to make certain that we produce a minimum of 2 million barrels of crude. I don't think we're doing up to that now, and that will take a lot of, you know, doing and thinking. So implementation can only be driven by the availability and cash backing of those programs. For 2020, I haven't seen the releases yet, but from what the president has said, they have made some good milestones. So it's for us to be able to now look at those areas and how he has impacted. And please keep eyes on this. I am not as excited as what is happening in the formal sector, that I am worried about what is happening in the informal and real sector. That is where this implementation and its impact, you know, will be best assessed.
Bringing inflation down from 34% to 15% is also something that sounds good. CBN has been on inflation targeting for some time. Looking at this, how do you see, or what are those things that you think needs to be done very quickly? The medium,
productivity,
short term, long term.
Productivity. But there has to be, you know, a major driver to productivity, and it has to be energy, and cheap energy. Okay, the moment we get productive, 15% will be child's play. We can do 7%. It's all about what are you bringing to the table, what are you bringing to the market, and how competitive is that thing you're bringing. So the first thing is to be able to aggregate that bulk, and then the second thing is to begin to now make certain that it meets, you know, required international market standards. And we, of course, will sell. If in these very turbulent times, our trade surplus was running to about 6 trillion or something like that, about either 6 or 8 trillion. Imagine what will happen when, you know, all the ungoverned spaces, like I mentioned earlier, we are contributing something, you know, to the national purse. Imagine what will happen if out of this, you know, 80 million translating to about 65% or 35% of our useful, you know, budget is engaged in one productive activity or the other, not necessarily based on their formal education, but based on the skills that they've been able to acquire. So bringing it down is all about productivity, but the requirements for productivity will be first, one, power, because power is very critical. Two, the allied infrastructure to power. Three, the raw materials. Four, of course, the skills. Five, the market, okay? And then our capacity to be able to now hold on to that market share. If we do this, and the president says I'm determined to do it, and if all of us support and pray, okay, and then contribute, and when we finish praying, I'm certain that we'll be able to walk this talk and walk it well.
2025 is already around the corner. Let's look at support now also from state government. We always, many times, you agree with me that many will think that it's all the buck stops at the desk of the president. But the states have a role to play to complement whatever the federal government is doing. Mr. Kengo, how would you react to what are your expectations moving forward from state government?
Well, I even think that you should not even just be calling out the states now. You should also be calling out the local government. Because if you look at the new, revenue sharing formula, the local governments are getting 35%. Okay, and that's quite some huge, against the 10% that the federal government is going to be getting. So it is just not about the states, except you're using the word states as generic to be inclusive of local government. But I think for this conversation, it's important that we disaggregate them. So the first line of calling out will be the local government councils. Okay, but if, again, what we're hearing is true, a lot of them haven't even started getting, those revenue streams directly. I think that's a very important, area that the president and the Federal Executive Council must look at. Make certain that we empower those local governments, and even to the point of the community development associations. Then thereafter, yes, of course, the states would need to up their game. But let us even not look at the states now. Let's look at the local governments that are also getting money, and they are foundational. So the moment you strengthen that foundation, then the states become the building blocks, and then it can be properly assessed.
Well, I think it's a good way to live it. I must thank you so much for your time. Development economist Semeka Okengu joined us from our Abuja studios. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tolu. Glad to be here.
All right, now